Here's something that you might have heard of. This is the AMM-1, the audio multimeter, which suggests there's a bunch of things you can measure with this, and there are, but its biggest purpose is to measure the actual power output from your amplifier into the particular speaker that you've got connected at the moment. Let's see how that works. The first thing you're going to want to do if you want to measure the power of your amplifier is you need to find a frequency that the impedance of the speakers in the box that they're in is close to the rating that the amplifier is rated at that you want to compare. So if your amplifier is rated, like for example, this one's rated at 185 watts at 4 ohms. So I need to find the closest frequency I can to 4 ohms. So we'll turn it on. And we will switch to AC frequency and impedance. So I'm going to unmute the audio. And we know that we're at just about 40 hertz. That's 39 hertz. That's the resonant frequency of the driver in the box that it's in. So despite the fact that we're hearing a significant amount of sound, we don't have any impedance reading on here because it's registering less than 1 watt. That is not enough power. That is not enough power for the AMM-1 to figure out what the impedance is. Now, if I increase this even the slightest bit, I'm going to cross the threshold to 1 watt. There we go. So now if I go back to AC frequency and impedance, which is an involved process, now I'll see that my impedance is about 33 ohms. 32, 31, it's kind of bouncing around, but that is the resonant frequency of the woofer. So that means that despite all of this sound we're hearing, we're just barely kicking a watt into these speakers right now. So if we change that frequency, that's about as low as I can make it. That's 4.3 ohms. The rating I'm going to compare this to is at 4 ohms. So it's reasonable to expect that it might be less than what the manufacturer says it is. So I'm going to give this some power. And before I do that, I'm going to switch over to, let's go ahead and go to dyno. So before clipping was detected, I was getting 212 watts. I'm not sure why clipping is still being detected. Now that's what we have. So we know that this amplifier can at least produce, for short times, 211 watts before clipping, which is totally fine because it's rated at 185 watts. So let's clear that and let's go over to real-time power, which was right next to it, but we have to loop back around because of this interface. Now we have live power, real-time power, whatever. Now I'm going to take this up to 185 watts and then leave it alone, and we can see how long it can sustain its RMS rating. So it dropped 45 watts over that time, but that's a pretty unrealistic load. Let's see if we can find a lower frequency. That was That was like 69 hertz. Let's try the tuning frequency of the box, which is I think 22 hertz. Actually, first let's see what the impedance is. So at 22 hertz, we're 4.3 ohms, about the same as 69. Now let's see what kind of power we get with a short burst. Holy shit, it wasn't even clipping at 219. This amplifier is able to, at least for short periods of time, it's able to deliver what was advertised. There's other features that are included, such as DC voltage, and I don't think that's useful. So, I mean, if it had accurate low voltage DC measurements, maybe, but in my experience, it does not. The DC min-max would be pretty cool. You see what the voltage will dip to with a long cable run, or when you start your vehicle. So that's pretty useful. I haven't tested it. AC volts and current. Everything that I've tested so far with AC volt current, power factor, has pretty much agreed with the kilowatt P3, which also measures AC voltage, AC current, both true RMS, and they both account for power factor. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, obviously, is that it's going to give you an idea, a rough idea of what your amplifier is doing with your speakers. You know, it's got some other features, but that's really the main good thing that it can do. The bad is that it eats batteries. It uses 9-volt batteries. You might only get like an hour or two out of a 9-volt battery, a brand new 9-volt battery, which is just ridiculous. One of the ways that the manufacturer dealt with the battery life issue is by having an auto-off feature. That is one of the most annoying aspects of this meter, is that it will turn itself off after a random amount of time. And it doesn't matter if you just changed modes, it's just going to turn off when it's going to turn off, and you have to turn it back on again. And then, of course, you have to go through each of the modes. It's only got like 7 modes. Why not have 7 buttons? You know, I'm going to assume that whoever designed this has a MacBook. The next thing that's ugly is, you know, if you ask a question, you're not going to get an answer. If you ask, hey, why is this showing greater than 200 ohms? They're not gonna respond. You know, like we were just talking about. It's gonna say greater than 200 ohms if it's picking up less than what it thinks is a watt, and it doesn't address this in the manual. And in fact, it goes a step beyond not addressing it by saying that you actually can measure the impedance with any power, and obviously that's not true. But overall, I think this is a good thing. I think that, you know, more people should have the access to the ability to cut through the bullshit of manufacturers of amplifiers, because, you know, you're not getting the truth with way too many of them. You know, it might say 2,000 watts, and in reality, it might be closer to 500 watts. This helps people address that. I think it's a good thing that there's some people that are just angry that this even exists, and I don't understand that. And I think they might be angry at the price, and I have to agree. You know, the price is a bit high, but I knew that before I bought it. So, and I know that this is a really low volume item. You know, there's probably not, I would say in the hundreds. There might be in the thousands of these made, but certainly, you know, nowhere near as many as these. I mean, there's probably tens of millions of the kilowatt out there, even though this probably does in some way, if it was designed slightly differently, it might do everything that we want it to do. It just doesn't work without, you know, 120 volt. If they could figure out a way to make it less expensive or make it more useful, if it had the oscilloscope screen where you could access that and see and actually measure clipping, like measure how much clipping. Also, the low voltage DC measurements, which is the very first thing that it wants to do, is show you DC voltage. And it may be useful for automotive voltages, like 12 volts, but for, you know, like 3.7 volts to 4 volts, it's not accurate. And that's really unfortunate. So this pretty much limits this to strictly automotive and audio needs. If it was less money, or if it was useful for other things, you know, then it would be a different story. But as it is, I am glad it exists. I'm glad it's a thing. Those are just some of my thoughts.